busloads of migrants were dropped off in sub-zero temperatures at the Washington, D.C. home of Vice President Kamala Harris. Video showed migrants getting off and onto buses outside of the Naval Observatory, the Vice President's official residence. Many were lightly dressed for temperatures as low as -8 degrees Celsius. A volunteer with the Migrant Solidarity Mutual Aid Migrant Network said the migrants, who are from Ecuador, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Colombia, and Peru, were supposed to go to New York, but were diverted by bad weather. It was not clear who was responsible for sending the buses to Harris's residence, but migrants were previously dispatched there by the Texas governor, Greg Abbott, in September. Several Republican governors have been sending migrants to northern states to protest a rise in border crossings. And to look at these stories in more detail, we can speak with Arise U.S. correspondent Eric Ham, who joins us from Washington. Eric, good to see you. Thank you for joining us on Newsday. The New York governor was clear there. She called the snowstorms a battle with nature. What's the latest, please?
Well, she's absolutely right. The United States has been battling these severe storms for the last 72 to 96 hours. And just today, it appears that the country is beginning to come out of this deep thaw, but not without some recriminations. Already, we have seen more than 30 people died as a result of this storm, and more than 1.7 million people across the country have been without power. Already, we are now seeing that snowstorm crews that have been out attempting to try to fight these storms have even struggled very much. People found in vehicles. In fact, many people across the country have been told not to leave their homes. More than 1,700 flights have been canceled across the country, and that's only domestic flights. And so we are now seeing that today temperatures are going to steadily begin to increase through the week. But the country has certainly gone through what has been a catastrophic storm, and that doesn't even begin to include the millions of dollars it is going to take to not only restore power, but also to fix a lot of the damage that we're seeing already being inflicted across the country.
And speaking to that loss of power, what's that looking like now?
Yeah, well, as we said, nearly 2 million people have lost power across the country. But what we are beginning to see now is the power grid in many places across the nation beginning to come back online. In fact, where we saw it was nearly 2 million people without power, that number is actually down now significantly to less than 100,000 people without power across the country. But still, when we're talking about places where temperatures got to below 50 or minus 60 degrees in many places, that certainly is little comfort to those that have been without power for so long. But right now, what we're seeing is people are steadily getting power restored across the country. And of course, as we've seen in places like New York, particularly Buffalo, where people have been slammed with nearly 60 inches or more of snow, we're beginning to see some of those crews be able to actually get people back to their lives, and snow removal beginning to steadily take hold across the country as well.
Well, Eric, in other news, we saw pictures of migrants being bused to Washington, then dropped off close to Vice President Kamala Harris's official residence. Please walk us through what's going on here.
Yeah, this is pretty interesting, sort of like a big bah humbug, right before the Christmas holiday. We saw on Christmas Eve, when again, there were frigid temperatures, you had these migrants who were bused from Texas, as far as Texas, all the way to Washington, D.C., right here in the nation's capital, and they were dropped off right at the doorstep of the vice presidential residence. Now, this has been a stunt that we have been seeing Republican governors play out throughout the year to protest the Biden immigration policy. And now we're seeing that these stunts have continued, and of course taking place just before the Christmas holiday. Now, when these migrants actually arrived, there was preparation made to actually be able to handle them. In fact, we saw that nonprofit organizations were on hand to provide clothing, food, and more importantly, shelter out of the sub-zero and frigid temperatures that were not only inflicting Washington, D.C., but of course the rest of the country as well.
All right. Now, we also saw the U.S.'s $1.7 trillion spending bill approved before the holiday break. So we know the government's working. Can you tell us what they'll be working on exactly?
Yeah, I mean, this is always, given the partisan rancor that we're seeing across the United States, the fact that we saw Republicans and Democrats come together to actually get this legislation through, but also to ensure that the government would be funded through the fiscal year of 2023 speaks to just how dire both parties thought the situation was. But it was not without some consternation, because we do know that House Republicans were deeply upset that because they wanted to see this spending bill actually wait until they officially took control of Congress in the coming weeks. But of course, many Senate Republicans simply were not confident that House Republicans could actually get something done, which is why we saw this move made now. But again, this massive spending bill, which provides nearly more than $800 billion in funding for defense spending programs, with another $600 to $700 billion spent on domestic programs. But in that spending, what we see is $45 billion being spent on providing resources to Ukraine as they continue to engage in their war against Russia. In addition to that, we know that there is more money also being spent on climate change. In fact, the state and foreign aid budget, money that goes to foreign aid, as well as the State Department for many foreign affairs programs, that budget was actually increased by more than 4%, which actually is a good sign not only for the continent of Africa, particularly given that the Biden administration recently pledged tens of billions of dollars to ongoing efforts in Africa as a result of the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit.
Well, thank you, Eric. Back to the question I asked earlier on, or if you could give us some more information, if you have it. What are the reactions that have trailed, the migrants being delivered more or less to Kamala Harris's residence? Even though you said that this is not the first time such has occurred, I'm just wondering what reactions you've seen as a result of that.
Look, right now in the United States, we are seeing a massive fight take place over this migration issue. And this has actually been something that has vexed the Biden administration since they came into office. In fact, one Democratic congresswoman from New York actually was the only Democrat that did not support this $1.7 trillion spending package. And one of the reasons why she did not is because there was increased money provided for the Homeland Security Department, which actually monitors and assures that many people do not come into this country. So this is going to be a fight that is going to continue to be waged, not only in Washington, but across the country. We know that right now the Supreme Court is actually looking at this issue of how migrants can be detained and how, in fact, they can actually come into the country. There are a number of states who have actually filed onto this amicus brief regarding this issue of Title 42. This is an immigration policy that was implemented during the Trump administration that is now looking as though it's going to go away. But now what we've seen is the Supreme Court has halted that move. And so what we're seeing now is much chaos and turmoil over where the United States is headed in terms of how it governs and, more importantly, how it polices the flow of immigration and migrants into the United States.
And do you foresee migrants being another hot issue in the next election? Of course, we're 2 years away, but we're working towards it, right? Past two elections, we've seen it being a major turning point issue. Do you foresee that in the next election?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, this is going to be an issue that is going to play out over the next 2 years. And when you say that, yes, the election is 2 years away, suggesting that might be a long time out. Remember, former President Donald Trump has already announced that he's running for president. In fact, a number of other potential Republicans are preparing to actually get into this nomination battle. And so what we're seeing is election seasons across the United States are actually beginning much earlier and earlier every single election season. and this one is no different. And this issue of election and the migration flows is going to be one issue that is going to continue to be on the table. In fact, Republicans have always attempted to try to use this as a cudgel against Democrats to try to get many independents to actually side with Republicans on this issue. So this is not something that's going away anytime soon. And what we're going to see, particularly over the next 2 years, now that Republicans have taken control of the House of Representatives, this is going to be an issue that is going to be front and center for Republicans. And also, we're going to continue to see courts of the highest land, not only federal courts, but the Supreme Court weigh in on this issue as well.
Well, thank you so much, Arise U.S. correspondent Eric Ham. Thank you for joining us on Newsday. We appreciate your time and in-depth analysis as always.